This is Esther video 16. It's on chapter 8 of the book of Esther. We noticed in our last video we had a really exciting thing at the second banquet. Esther and was sitting on a couch, and Haman fell on top of her, and when he did that, just as he was doing that, the king came back in from the garden. They grabbed up Haman. The king says, "I don't want to see him no more. Take him out and hang him." One guy says, "Well, there's a gallows that's been built 75 feet high." He said, "Hang him on it." So that was the end of Haman. And so now we have chapter 8. The same day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told him how he was related to her. "He's my uncle. He's the man that has raised me." The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Now, Esther did not want to offend the king by saying, "I don't need the estate. Don't give me the money. I've got everything that I need." And so she just kept it and put Mordecai in charge of it. Verse 3, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. So she's got this thing on her mind. She's got a request that she's on the behalf of others, and so remember the differences there between a request and a petition. And so in verse 3, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which had been devised against the Jews. Then the king extended his gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it is the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disasters fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" So King Ahasuerus replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew. Now, because Mordecai had received the signet ring of the king, he's now second in command of all the people in all 127 provinces. So he says to them, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now you write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no other document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." So once he had already made this other decree, he couldn't revoke it. So they had to make a decree that would counteract the first decree. At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, they wrote all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps and to governors and nobles of all 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and their children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves of their enemies. So here goes the new edict out, and on exactly the same day that all the Jews were to be killed, this edict said, on that day all the Jews can defend themselves, no problems, and if anybody attacks you, you get to kill them and you get to take all their property. Verse 14, the couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Shushan. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Shushan held a joyous celebration for the Jews. It was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because of fear of the Jews had seized them. During the Spanish Inquisition, there was a word that came out. It's called controversios, or not contra, but conversios. That is, people that changed their nationality from the Jews to Christianity or to the Catholic Church, so that they wouldn't be killed. And we have the same situation here. We have people that are non-Jewish claiming to be Jewish so that they would not be killed. Now, notice that during all of this, it happens after 3 days, after all of this stuff where they have all been, all of the stuff that happened in chapter 7 with Haman. So now in chapter 9, we have the king trying to make up for what all has happened. He retrieves the signet ring from Haman. Haman had it for just a little while, but he still had it, made him viceroy of the kingdom, and he had to have it in order to send out the decree that he sent out. But King Ahasuerus took the ring off of Haman and gave it to Mordecai. Mordecai is put in the charge of the estate of Haman. Now the estate's been given to Esther. Now the estate involved much property, much money. If you'll remember back in about chapter 3 or 4 maybe, Haman brags about how that all of his wealth and everything. Matter of fact, he even offered the king money. I believe it was 10,000 talents. So I'll give you 10,000 talents, or 10,000 million, or $10 million, or even $100 million if you'll let me kill all the Jews. He was very wealthy. The king told Mordecai to rewrite. Notice it's very interesting there. He said, excuse me, back in verse he said, you write whatever you want to write and just seal it with my ring. And so this is what happens. And notice what he says. Whatever you desire to write, you write it. So God had to be in this. God's not mentioned in the book of Esther anywhere. But in order to make it appear, God is still in control, even though he might be hidden.